Hello everyone, it's me Jenny. It's time for another movie review. And today's movie review is yet another thing that I was browsing Netflix and I was like, oh, I haven't watched that in a long time, so I'll give it another go. And so today's movie review is the Disney Atlantis film, which I know has got a subheading which I can't remember off the top of my head and I could just look it up, but I've already turned the camera on, so there we go. It's the Disney Atlantis film, and the trouble with this film that I found continuously as I was watching it is the reason why this film was not marketed very well and was not well received is not because it's not an adequate movie, but because when you're watching it you can't help but compare it to the Disney structure. And in many ways, for a Disney animated film, one of the last mostly hand-drawn animated films, it deviates from most of the principles that has made Disney a branding success. It is not a Disney princess film. The lead character is not a Disney princess. It is not a romance film, although there is romance aspects. It's not a fairy tale. It includes quite a bit of digital animation rather than hand-drawn animation. There's no songs. Even Tarzan, which didn't actually have any like musical numbers, had a lot of very lyrical ballads thrown in the background, which kind of drew in the audience from that sort of music-based set point, so you can have that musical connection. All the music in it was perfectly adequate, but it's all choral background music. You don't really have that, like, you know, the opening scene to Frozen. You don't have that automatic jump into the emotion of the film. And the trouble with this film is it is an adequate movie. It's not a great movie, but it is an adequate movie because it's deviating from those standard tropes. You're constantly distracted by that as a film. If it wasn't a Disney film, I think it would have done better in a strange way, because it's an actually pretty adequate adventure film. It has all of those tropes that you find in an adventure film. It's very much, you know, a hero's journey, in pretty much every single trope that you can have within a hero's journey. It's an adventure movie. It's, you know, 1920s sort of, you know, classic young hero going on an archaeological expedition. There's the femme fatale, there's the evil military that's, you know, it's the militarian use of power versus the idealistic search for knowledge, which is pretty much in almost every single adventure fantasy that there is. Indiana Jones, all of the B-movie ones, if anyone's seen the Librarian series or anything like that. It's that classic trope in an animated movie, and I think it is done pretty well. The hero is relatively goofy, and it's well directed in that it's very prettily directed. It's got that sort of sharp style hand-drawn animation in the same way that a lot of the more modern Disneys are, so it's sort of the Emperor's New Groove, sort of Milan, definitely Hercules sort of style, sharp angles, very specific figure shapes, type drawing rather than the softer older ones. It's very, the 2D animation is very 2D, there isn't that much shading. I noticed a lot of the times, like when in the first opening sequence it's just like cans, you don't really get any shading at all, it's all just drawn lines, which is very simplistic, and then adds a whole other dimension when obviously it has the 3D animation, so a lot of the more sci-fi elements, like the flying apparatuses that go around and the water effects, they feel slightly out of this world, which is really effective for the way that they do the world building in this, how the Atlantis powers are very much beyond the comprehension of normal entities. The fact that it does break into that different animation style is very effective. I found it to be, it's very fast paced, and at least the first part of the film is very fast paced, and they try and get a lot of information in that time, and it's good that it's fast paced because it is so tropish. So, you know, you don't really have time to linger in the tropes, but then what they do is they pile on more tropes on top of it. They put on the fish out of water not having a good connection with their cohorts and then getting the good connection with the cohorts, and, you know, the adventure is kind of one montage, and there's a lot of things that are very rushed and they don't necessarily make up for it in later stories. There's a lot of kind of the MacGuffin for this, the power of Atlantis, is very, very unclear and constantly shifting, which is good in a way, as I said, because it's the MacGuffin. It's meant to be this ununderstandable force, but the rules for it, they keep on adding new rules, but they contradict each other. They don't really make any sense. You could read into the fact that, from a feminist perspective, you could read into the source of the power being the kings of this this race that only then host the females when they actually take a living form, which you can read into it more than one way on that, depending on what perspective you're coming from. But I found it slightly either empowering or creepy, depending on how you feel about that. A load of male forces infesting a female force, maybe without the woman's consent. You can read into it that way, or you can read into it like all the power, the physical power being within a female entity. You can read into it in multiple ways. It was so unclear, this crystal power that has the ability to make flight and heal and create like a super force powered entity that can do stuff, but in the meantime they're just shut down and not doing anything in particular. The crystallizing of the main villain, spoiler alert, there was no explanation to that whatsoever at any point. So it was just a lot of MacGuffin building. It wasn't just a simple entity, it was a whole thing that never really was fully explained. The thing that really annoyed me with this was the language-based aspects of this film. Things like a translation of a Viking text to an English text through Atlantean somehow is solved by a misreading of the letter E for C, but I don't think the Vikings would have used the same word for Iceland and for Iceland and island that we currently do, so that one letter switch is really frustrating for me, because I was like, that makes no sense. That makes no sense. There's no way the Viking word and the Atlantean word would use the same letter grouping for a word that's probably different from the modern day Iceland and the modern day Ireland. The fact that those two places probably wouldn't have had much of a language connection. The fact that it was wrong by one letter in the modern English, it's so frustrating to me. It just doesn't make sense. Similarly, the concept that there's a proto-language is something that is theorised in linguistics. The concept that they would know all of the other European languages and then somehow just be able to spew English forth seems incredibly unlikely. And if they have that comprehension of language analysis and language interpretation, if they have, as the Atlantean dialect, that many proto-language aspects, then I find it really unlikely that they couldn't decode their own scribbles. But there we go, maybe that's just my opinion. I think it's very well directed. There's a lot of sci-fi elements, and as I said, trying not to compare it to other Disney films, this has definitely got a lot more of a male target group. It's got Transformer-like robot creatures who are, you know, massive in size. At the end of the film felt, a couple of the creatures that kind of came out of that felt very Iron Giant. As I said, the beginning is kind of very Transformers, it's spaceships, and it's very reminiscent of, obviously, Avatar. A lot of the themes of this film and Avatar could be clearly switched out, almost verbatim, which is a shame in a way. And it's very well directed, it's very beautiful. The water effects and the lighting effects particularly are gorgeous. As I said, the general art style is pretty simple. There is a reasonable amount of, not sexuality, but insinuating of sexual content, which I think is more enjoyable to an older audience. I think if young women could be encouraged to watch this film, I think it could be read as a very feminist move for Disney. However, I think it's more of a Disney trying to market themselves to a male audience and not quite getting that boundary. But I enjoyed the film. I didn't love the film. I think it's worth watching once if you're a huge Disney fan, or if you're a fan of kind of pulpy action adventures. If you like the cheesy action adventures, not necessarily Indiana Jones. Indiana Jones is kind of the peak of the cheesy action adventures. If you like that sort of genre and you want something that's slightly more goofy, this is a really good place to start. It's kind of a cartoon. Indiana Jones meets Transformers meets Iron Giant, set in a sort of Avatar type world. I enjoyed it. I think I need to look up some of the voice actors, because a lot of the voice acting in this is very familiar. That's both a good thing and a bad thing, because it was pretty well done, but I definitely felt like I was like, I feel like I've heard this person before. relatively often, but there we go. Have you seen this film? I know it's not one of the most watched Disney films. I'd like to hear your opinion, or read your opinion in the comments if you've seen this film. What's your opinion on all of the aspects that I've talked about? And yeah, I would like to see that and all that malarkey. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys all tomorrow for another video. Bye guys.